You're listening to author Jason Lee Willis read The Alchemist's Map. This is part 2, The Learned Astronomer. Chapter 9, New York, 1831. With the colonization of the American continent, the fur trade industry had become a global market. The New World sparked the imagination of consumers in Europe, and pelts, especially those of the beaver, became a prized commodity. European nations such as England, France, and Holland competed to control and expand trading influence via trading posts, where Native American tribes violently competed for control of rivers. As the American colonies grew and the eastern rivers failed to keep up with the demands, dozens of Native American tribes were displaced, stacking up in the territories of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois for fear of entering into the territory of the still powerful Oceti-Sakowin alliance, known by their enemies as the Sioux. After 3 centuries of aggressive plunder, once powerful nations such as France and the Iroquois League lost their territory to new nations, the United States and the Anishinaabe, with the Ojibwe, or Chippewa, controlling the region surrounding Lake Superior. Capitalizing on the sustained demand for felt hats, the American Fur Company, led by America's first multimillionaire, John Jacob Astor, monopolized control of the region and market. Astor, a German immigrant who once worked in his father's butcher shop, expanded his operation into the upper Mississippi watershed, while also expanding sales into new markets such as China. His standing as one of America's most powerful men secure, Astor sold his company to Ramsey Crooks, and with the profits began investing in New York City real estate. He also became a prominent Freemason, serving as Master of Holland Lodge, number 8. Hank Sibley held Astor's letter of invitation as he stood staring up at the facade of the Holland Lodge. "When summoned by the king, you better damn well come running with hat in hand. Do whatever these bastards want." Even with his black tie and finest jacket, Sibley still felt like a boy. At his father's insistence, he had cut his black hair short and shaved off his beard, leaving a mustache to avoid looking like a schoolboy. Unlike his peers, who spent time at colleges, Sibley just returned from the frontier. At 21, he was energetic and fit. "This will be my second step in becoming a great man," Sibley decided as he walked through the front doors of the lodge. "Today, my life changes." "Henry Hastings Sibley," he told the clerk, a man of similar age. "I have a 3:30 meeting with Mr. Astor." The clerk looked down, almost surprised to see the name on the schedule, and arranged for him to be escorted to the waiting room, where he waited for another hour. As the time for the meeting approached, another man with a slender, hooked nose entered the lobby and sat down across from him. Trying not to stare, Sibley stole glances to identify his rival. "Who the hell is Mr. Chickenbeak? My competition for a promotion? Well, the job is mine." Astor's front office door opened, and Sibley found himself leaning forward to stand. "Astor will see you now, Mr. Delhut." The narrow man shot through the doorway, slamming it behind him, causing Sibley to confirm the time. He stood and approached the lobby secretary. "Are the meetings running ahead or behind schedule? I was supposed to meet with Mr. Astor at 3:30. "Yes, a joint meeting with Mr. Delhut. I'm sure they will call for you when they need you." During the next few minutes, Sibley could hear raised voices from inside the room, which only heightened his anxiety. When the door opened, Mr. Delhut finished his sentence and then abruptly stopped, turning back to the door. Mr. Astor, a portly man with a square face, sat behind the desk. At the door, a mousy man with an apologetic face ushered Sibley into the room. "Mr. Astor, this is Hank Sibley, the young clerk from Mackinac Island. Hank, this is Mr. Astor. I'm Malcolm Gunn, his personal assistant, and I believe you already know Solomon Delhut?" "Shit, I had no clue." Solomon found himself joining the men around the large desk. Actually, I do not know if we've, Delhut interrupted. I'm a friend of his father. I don't remember if we've been properly introduced before. Solomon Delhut, he introduced himself and gripped Sibley's hand like a vice. The two Solomons. Son of a bitch, yes, I remember Mother joking about it once. Solomon Sibley, Solomon Delhut. Off to a bad start, Hank. Get it together. Astor began. Hank, I know you've been patiently building a career for yourself as a clerk in the American Fur Company, as well as joining the local Masonic Lodge. But we're going to have to change the pace of things due to... Someone stole something from me, Delhut bristled bitterly, stealing the smile from Astor's face. What good is a network of secret societies if you can't discover any secrets? Astor shifted nervously, and for the first time, Sibley realized who had called the meeting. Delhut. A strange silence fell over the room. If anything was stolen during my time at Mackinac, I can assure you... All three men scoffed, prompting Sibley to cut his losses mid-sentence. So what the hell was stolen? The silence continued. Tell him about the promotion, then, Delhut said. Astor put a smile back on his face. There are big changes happening in the Wisconsin Territory. With a little nudge, the United States government is strengthening its presence at the rededicated Fort Snelling, at the confluence of the Mississippi and St. Peter's rivers. It will hopefully be a strong enough presence to stabilize the tension between the feuding Chippewa and Sioux nations. Think of it as a parent standing between two fighting siblings, Gunn added. I thought things were peaceful between the Chippewa and Sioux. What are they talking about? Along with this new financial investment, the American Fur Company is also investing in the territory with a permanent cut stone outpost, one that we would like you to manage upon completion. Damn it all. Farther west than Mackinac? Managing an outpost? It would be an honor. Mr. Crooks will speak to you about the details of the operation, Gunn said. By the time the building complex is completed, you will be familiar with the operations in the region. But that is not why I'm here today, is it? Sibley asked. Astor said, As you already heard, Mr. Delhut recently had something. If you don't own it, is it really stolen? Delhut's eyes tightened. They murdered a member of my extended family. I thought he died in the riots, Astor countered. Have I come to the wrong man? Delhut asked. Are you going to provide the fealty that was promised? Astor grimaced. Mr. Delhut had something very precious stolen from him, and he has come to me for information and assistance, which is why we'd like you to be our trusted friend at Fort Snelling. A spy. Do you want to explain what Hank will be monitoring? Astor asked. I would have preferred an older man, one with a track record of trustworthiness, Delhut said, studying Sibley with venom in his eyes. Do you vouch for him, Astor? Mr. Gunn and I gleaned Hank from a list of impeccable candidates, most of whom are Freemasons. So yes, we believe Hank is our man. Then you tell him, Delhut said. Astor obliged. Before it was stolen from him, Solomon was attempting to purchase a rare and very old map. While we have not yet learned the identity of the thief, the details on the map will most likely lead him to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. The thief will not be alone, and will certainly need a support team, more likely than not, a team of laborers. Our thief will need extractors for the operation. So remember, the person you meet may have considerable financial and political power backing him. It sounds like a treasure map. The lost gold of Captain Kidd? Sibley kept his thoughts to himself and listened to Astor. As manager of the Fort Snelling outpost, you will have dozens of fur traders, both licensed and unlicensed, at your door, along with countless bands of Indians. It will be your duty to know the business of every man who steps a foot in the upper Mississippi watershed. Is that understood? What the hell? I understand. Am I to obtain the stolen map? Delhut answered, if you want to advance in this world, you are not to ask any questions, but only be our eyes and ears in the West. Yours is a defensive position. I have others who can do my bidding. If you see anything suspicious, you need to let us know. Speaking of suspicious activity, Astor interrupted, Mr. Gunn has a few leads that Hank might want to keep an eye on. Spill the beans, Malcolm, Delhut said. Tell me who might have my map. Gunn looked down at his notepad. First, there is an interesting development in Washington, D.C. A young Colonel Hebert in the U.S. Corps of Engineers is trying to reshape a Corps of Topographical Engineers under the War Department. Easily blocked by our friends in Congress, and it is very unlikely our thief would be so public, Astor assessed. What else? There have been two curious arrivals in St. Louis. First, a German prince and apprentice of Alexander von Humboldt, Maximilian of Wiedenum. He has announced his intentions to explore the Missouri River. The Missouri, not the Mississippi, Delhut said, shaking his head. Not according to the Lahontan map. Maximilian has brought a painter with him, Carl Bodmer, Gunn finished. I thought he'd brought a geologist with him. I might be interested. If he'd brought a geologist with him, I might be interested, Delhut said. Astor nodded. What else, Gunn? The last one falls in the category of a small world coincidence. Sir William Stewart, a Scottish hero in the Battle of Waterloo, has arrived in St. Louis, also looking for transportation into the wilderness. So? Delhut snarled again. Sir William Drummond Stewart. His aunt was Lady Margaret Drummond, which makes his uncle the late William Drummond, former owner of the Almaric map, Delhut muttered. Did he kill his own aunt to obtain it? Gunn seemed pleased with himself, his favorite suspect apparent in his expression. Captain Billy, as he was known by his men, is a man of low character, which, despite his pedigree, kept him from joining any of the societies his uncle once belonged to. Shunned by the family, it is possible Billy killed his aunt to obtain his family's ancestral treasure. However, he did have an alibi at the time of Lady Drummond's death, and he leaves Mirthley Estate after many rumors and scandals. He's in St. Louis now, looking for mountain men who will go on an adventure. Delhut turned to Sibley. What do you think? He has motive, means, ambition, and cunning, Sibley assessed. I would say he's certainly a man to watch. Speaking of Lady Drummond, Gunn continued, there has been a very curious development from France. Professor Jean-Nicolas Nicollet, one of the last people to see Lady Drummond alive, has abandoned his scientific career in France to begin anew in America, marketing himself as a cartographer. Nicollet again, Delhut asked. My investigator said he had an alibi and no motive. He's the astronomer, isn't he? Astor clarified. The one Lady Drummond went to about the map? Yes, and against my better judgment, dismissed in the crime. What connections does he have, Gunn? None. He is a devout Catholic, but has avoided assistance from the Catholic Church. The scientific community respects him, but shuns him for his celebrity and lavish lifestyle. He was a childhood savant whose flame has burnt out. And now the astronomer has become a cartographer after seeing the Drummond map. Astor dismissively shook his head. And also a student of Alexander von Humboldt. The West is more than just beaver pelts to scientists. It is a chance to make a name for oneself. Gunn shrugged. In any case, you can rest easy knowing that he is currently in Washington, D.C., having exhausted his funds for travel. But I thought you needed to know. Delhut turned back to Sibley. Now do you understand why we need a gatekeeper? You will watch over the frontier for any of these known threats, as well as any unknown ones. I look forward to my duties, but... Why did you add but, fool? Why did you stop short? But what? Delhut said. If we maintain control of the territory, why do we sit back and wait for the inevitable to happen? I mean, waiting for Hebert, Maximilian, Stuart, or Nicollet to steal from us again? You said earlier that whoever killed Lady Drummond will most likely hire his own agent to do his bidding. Why don't we hire our own Nicollet, a scientist and explorer able to find whatever we're looking for before the others show up? Delhut's mouth tightened. We've already tried, Astor said. Over the past few decades, we've sent our finest to the headwaters of the Mississippi, looking for Delhut's treasure, which means one of two things. Either I've spent my life on a wild goose chase, Delhut answered, or the information given to me by my ancestors is wrong, which is why I needed that map. Then I will watch over your territory for any threats, Sibley affirmed, and hopefully learn what the hell these men are looking for. Hours up the Hudson River, another servant put to rest his questions about the map. Unlike Hank Sibley, Jacques Palissy no longer cared about the mystery of the map, for along with an address, he had paperwork making him the new postmaster of Albany, New York. Slipping the metal tube under his arm, Palissy knocked on the stately door of the large farmhouse. A tall Englishman, looking slightly agitated, stood at the door. Greetings, Mr. Fanshawe. Palissy began his introductions, which did little to change the stern expression of Fanshawe until the name of their shared benefactor was spoken. Oh, of course, George Fanshawe said, opening the door wide. Come in, Mr. Palissy. Even though the farm was built in the rugged hills outside of the city of Albany, the interior held all the amenities of a London home. Hospitality is not necessary, Palissy added. I was instructed only to deliver this letter and the map. After years of intercepting mail at La Poste, Palissy had no problems opening and then resealing the correspondence to Mr. Fanshawe. The letter congratulated Mr. Fanshawe on his appointment as the official United States geologist and his commission to explore the upper Mississippi. Surely they know my skills as a snoop and spy, even amongst friends. The contents of the cylinder had been thoroughly inspected as well. Instead of the ornate alchemist map, which had been his companion on the Atlantic crossing, it held a cheap copy, drawn upon thin paper so as to overlay it on another map of the upper Mississippi River. Then you're dismissed, Fanshawe said, closing the door on his face. You are an errand boy also, Palissy decided as he walked back down the road into town. Rural New York seemed an unnamed beast just a few yards away from the road. Palissy could not imagine the wild hell west of the Great Lakes, where Fanshawe had just been sent. Chapter 10. The White House was originally known as the President's Palace. When Thomas Jefferson took office, he claimed that the house was, quote, big enough for 2 emperors, 1 pope, and the Grand Lama. The President's Palace became known as the White House after the War of 1812, when British forces almost burnt it to the foundations. Rebuilt and expanded, the exterior was painted white to hide the signs of the fire. By the time Andrew Jackson took up residence, a north and south portico had been built, allowing Joseph Nicollet to walk right up to the front door. I am older than the White House, Nicollet observed as he joined others in line in front of him. How strange. Dressed in a borrowed suit jacket, Nicollet nervously produced his invitation in the evening to the evening festivities, and was then led to the north portico, where he waited by the stairs as he'd been told. Freshened with Caswell No. 6 cologne, Nicollet studied the architectural choices involving the newly remodeled building. The sound of a rustling dress caught his ear, and when he turned, he saw the beautiful young woman who had invited him. "Bonsoir, Miss Estin." "Please, Professor Nicollet, I told you before to call me Mary Ann. Are you ready to make the gentlemen of Washington, D.C. jealous?" "So much for being discreet." Nicollet bowed low, causing her to giggle. "I will certainly do my part." Is that lavender?" "It is. I promised rigorous dancing, and I wanted to remain fresh for the entire evening." She received his extended hand. "How has your first spring in America treated you?" "I have been given numerous promises that Maryland is lovely in May." "Yes, it does eventually thaw out around here. What are the springs in Paris like?" "Rainy and quite gloomy." "Ah, then Washington should feel right at home already." She smiled flirtatiously. "I must be honest with you, Professor Nicollet. Please, if I am to call you Mary Ann, then you must call me Joseph." "Joseph? What happened to Jean Nicolas?" "Excusez-moi. I am an American now, and Joseph suits me better. It is the name my father gave me. My mother preferred Jean Nicolas, or Nicky." Even though she was almost half his age, Nicollet noticed how easily the young woman warmed to him. "Just so you know, Uncle Jackson has decided to attend the party, so everyone will be watching us." "The president," Nicollet said, suddenly feeling lightheaded. "Merci bien." "Yes, Uncle Jackson seems determined that I find a fiancée soon, to avoid any future scandals. So why is it that a handsome man such as yourself has remained single for so long?" An icy face appeared in his mind. Nicollet rolled his eyes and looked down. "I am simply unlucky in love." "I heard a rumor that the talented Juliana Sabine once made a trip to Paris in a desperate attempt to win your affections, only for you to spurn her." No, it was the other way around. Juliana found a nobler man in the end." "If I were back in Tennessee, I'm sure I would have 3 children by now, but here in Washington, under the spotlight of politics, love is a little fickle. How do your experiments in the garden turn out?" Merci beaucoup. Ferdinand Hassler and I are still overwhelmed with the data we requested." How could I turn down the benefits request of such a sweet old man like Ferdinand? Beside, the two of you will make Washington the center of the West." Entering the East Wing, a crowd of 100 or more people was flitting about like a host of sparrows, each with an agenda. Nicollet could feel the eyes of the crowd upon him, as they all tried to figure out who the stranger was on the arm of the most eligible maid in the capital. "What do you think of Washington so far?" "Everything is so fresh and new. The trees are young and orderly, the streets are straight and flawless, and even the residences are built symmetrically." "What are your impressions of the White House? How does it compare?" "Magnifique." Nicollet held back from being too superfluous. "Are there grander residences in Paris?" "Certainly, but there the taint of the past seems to hang upon all the buildings. Everything here is so much more open. I was actually surprised how accessible the White House was. In Paris, there would have been gates and guards surrounding it." "Yes, well, Uncle Jackson is not called the People's President for no reason," Mary Ann explained, slowing upon entering the fray to allow the crowd to come to them. "My sympathies about what is happening to your country, but America is the land of opportunity." "Yes, Ferdinand Hassler helped me get in the front door of the White House. Now it is time to get my funding." A few weeks earlier, he and the Swiss American scientists decided to make the White House garden the center of all measurements in America, which was not only practical, but also caught the attention of those in the White House. especially Miss Easton, who had heard of Nicollet and the coming comet. Now, Marianne identified faces for the important names he'd learned, while his presence made her many suitors jealous. Joel, Marianne guided him to a tall, slender man with thin black hair on his head and striking sideburns along his stern face. This is Joseph Nicollet of France. He is a fellow man of science and, much like yourself, a bachelor for far too long. Joel Poncet, the man vigorously shook Nicollet's hand. A man of science. What is your field? Nicollet asked. Botany, isn't it? Marianne interjected. We received your Christmas plants. They were beautiful. The flor de la noche buena, Poncet added. We call it the poinsettia. Joel is one of Uncle Jackson's most trusted advisors, Marianne said. He is far more internationally savvy than all the men in this room combined. You flatter me, Miss Easton. But my scientific prowess is amateur at best when compared to the illustrious astronomer Jean-Nicolas Nicollet. He prefers Joseph now that he's an American. Poncet added, I hear you've been working with Ferdinand Hassler. Nicollet was taken aback. We? Don't worry, Professor Nicollet. I'm not secretly spying on you. I have friends on the steering committee responsible for funding projects. I came across your name on a bill trying to establish a hydrographic office separate from either the supervision of the Army or Navy. Yes, Mr. Hassler is patiently waiting to find out the fate of the bill. Patiently? Ha! Perhaps we were talking about a different cantankerous old man, Poncet laughed. Why your sudden interest in hydrology? Lose interest in astronomy? Oh, of course not. With Halley's Comet almost upon us, Ferdinand's hydrographic office is established, it has always been a desire of mine to explore and map rivers, like my mentor Humboldt once did. Mapping rivers. What a surprise. I'll see what I can do to help Hassler's bill, but if you really want to make a name for yourself, you must become friends with that man over there. Poncet fixed his eyes on a fierce fellow at a distant table. That man is Thomas Hart Benton, the senator from Missouri. It used to be the Chateau family who ran the West, but Senator Benton now holds the keys to the West. He can help fund you. Benton. Nicollet already knew the name of Thomas Hart Benton, already a thorn in my side. Marianne also seemed to cool at the mention of Benton. She whispered in Nicollet's other ear, Senator Benton is originally from Tennessee and used to be Uncle Jackson's most trusted friend, but in the War of 1812 they brawled openly, and things have never been the same. I would not trust that man. Poncet whispered even lower, There's a saying that Senator Benton never quarrels, but when he does fight, a funeral follows. Would you like to meet him? Marianne asked softly. Could he fund an expedition? Easton and Poncet both nodded. Proceed. Marianne took him by the arm and led Nicollet through the crowded floor. Be careful with Senator Benton, Marianne said. It is said he shot a rival attorney through the throat. The man challenged Senator Benton's honesty. Humboldt was right about America being the wild, wild west. Terra Fonte. Benton is a proponent of manifest destiny, which is why Joel Poncet said he now holds the keys to the West. I believe you'll find him receptive to your plans to utilize your new mapping techniques. I hope he is more receptive to it than Hassler's proposal. I will forever be in your debt, Miss Easton. And from the jealous looks I have been getting, I shall be in your debt also. Excuse me, a man said. Nicollet felt a strong hand on his bicep. Someone has come to challenge me for the arm of Marianne, but when he turned, he could tell immediately that the man had come for him, and not a dance with Miss Easton. The senator man said, Professor Nicollet, I've been looking for you. I will bring him back shortly, Miss Easton. Nicollet wasn't so certain. Chapter 11. In the deep recesses of the Louvre Museum in France, the night was almost over. Jean-Francois Champollion felt his head spin and knees buckle as he tumbled sideways over a wooden crate holding the bust of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Oh, I should have eaten more before I accepted the drink. The crate lessened the fall, and he balanced himself upon his palms while sitting on the crate. One of the surprises of his tour of the Valley of the Kings had been the discovery of the tomb of Akhenaten, a heretical pharaoh despised by his predecessors after a religious revolution away from classic polytheism towards monotheism. Either the creator of God, Champollion reflected, or a disciple of Moses. Champollion looked back over the uncorked bottle of wine and the two glasses set on the edge of the workbench. One glass remained almost as full as it had been when poured. The other, his, barely had a drop remaining. 50,000 francs. The news had been worth celebrating, and as a show of gratitude, Champollion swallowed it down and slammed the empty wine glass upon the table, to the amusement of the courier, Jean Plant. When dawn comes, I must go home and tell Rosine that we will be rich, and Zora will get a chance to visit America. As Champollion pushed himself back onto his feet, he felt a sharp pain in his forehead, a symptom antithetical to a bit of drunkenness. He stopped himself from taking another step, but then his balance spun wildly out of control. His arms did little to stop himself from falling, and he crashed hard on the cold floor, striking his head. The dull pain in his cheek did not trouble him as much as seeing his limbs begin to twitch and shake beyond his control. The pain in his sinus cavity expanded, and his stomach, which still held the contents of the glass of wine, had tightened. Have I been poisoned? The smooth-talking stranger, a courier from America, had come to him with promises of a financial windfall with a single trip to America for 2 months during the summer. The deal would not only line his pockets for the rest of his life, but it would also expand his reputation in America as the ultimate authority on the Rosetta Stone and Egyptian culture. Who would want to kill me? A strange comfort came over him, along with a full seizure, that he and Akhenaten had both been poisoned. For Akhenaten, it had been his longtime military commander, Horemheb, who poisoned him. For Champollion, his friend Jean-Nicolas Nicollet brought his demise. I should have kept my mouth shut. Nicollet tried to warn me. Why did I have to say something in public about the map? He tried to think of the men who'd laughed with him at the bar, but the muscle spasms took control of his body and then released for a moment. I'm only 41. I'm too young to die. Then another spasm, worse than the previous, stole his concentration for almost a full 30 seconds. Catching his breath, Champollion clawed at the crate as if trying to will himself back to his feet. But even his hands no longer obeyed. He remembered his hands once carving his name into the pillar of Karnak. Thus dies Pharaoh Jean-Francois Champollion, master of ancient languages. Chapter 12. Qu'êtes-vous? What do you want with me? Nicollet stared at the angry ogre, hoping not to quiver in fear. The man in front of him would have looked the part of a butcher, including a bloody, spattered apron and a massive cleaver in his hand. Instead, he wore all black, making him look like the Grim Reaper, albeit without the sickle. The emotionless man had the face of a bulldog and square shoulders to match. With his strong hand, he'd grabbed hold of Nicolet's lapels and practically dragged him outside of the dining hall until both men stood outside the tall pillars. Je ne comprends pas, monsieur. Father, the man said, sweeping his thick mane of black hair away from his face. Father Pierre-Jean de Smet, and you have become a real burr in my saddle.
Excusez-moi, Nicollet asked, almost convinced the priest was about to murder him. There were people nearby, but none of them could have saved him in time if de Smet wanted to kill him. Is this the man who killed Lady Drummond? I know who you are, Professor Nicollet, for it is I who sent for you. You? I came to America on my own accord. Did you? While I've never been to Cluse in Savoy, I have visited Paris, but my favorite place to lay down my weary head is the Chateau de l'Hermitage in Rouen. Are you familiar with this place? Yes. I know you are familiar with it because I wrote to my superiors requesting help. While I have been working closely with various Indian nations for several years now, I needed a man with a specific skill set if I am to do my job properly. Do your job properly? What is that exactly? To protect the weakest members of Christ's flock, de Smet said, his chest almost even with Nicollet's nose. Presently, I tend to the countless tribes of refugee Indians that have been displaced by the expansion of European immigrants. As shepherd, I battle wolves in all sorts of sizes and shapes, including the ones who come in the darkest hour at the break of dawn. Don't reveal anything. As admirable as all that sounds, I believe you are under false impressions. I came to America on my own accord, with my last franc. I am here on no other mission than to acquire a sponsor for a scientific expedition that will allow me to utilize barometric measurements to advance the field of cartography. Do you have any idea who Father Lupo is, or who Conrad Simmons personally reports to? You are either a man of great cunning or a great fool. Nevertheless, here you are. I see it as a sign of God, the true master of your destiny. Nicollet looked around, trying to see who else stepped outside. Instead, he could hear the music where Marianne Easton waited. Who are you to know the will of God? Excuse me? de Smet recoiled. I don't have time to set you straight. I'm taking a ship across the Atlantic to explain what is happening out on the frontier. Until I return, you are to take up residence at White Marsh, where the Jesuits will tend to your needs until I return. Then, you and I will properly finish this investigation together. What is happening on the frontier? Nicollet ignored the order and continued his own investigation. Fear, anticipation, a war is brewing, and I've only begun to understand why. Because of your foolishness, I have been summoned to present an update to men like Simmons and Lupo. If I were you, I'd keep my head down for the next few years, if you value it. White Marsh is a safe haven, and nearby, you'll find Jesuit colleges such as Georgetown where you can teach and study astronomy. I need you to understand that if you are not our agent, then you are an enemy. So go to White Marsh and wait. Wait. It'll be months, if not years, before de Smet returns, and time is of the essence. No. This is what is going to happen. I'm going to go right back into the ballroom, find Miss Easton, and continue to play the part of the pathetic, penniless Parisian. De Smet's bulldog face scowled. Nicollet did not fear the threats of de Smet. And hopefully, none of our enemies saw you foolishly stealing me away, because as long as they see me as a pathetic, penniless Parisian, and not the pawn of our powerful Catholic Church, I am invisible to our enemies. And now, to put his tail between his legs, you have no need to question my loyalties or my methods, which is why your powerful friends came to me in the first place. So no, Father de Smet, I will not wait for you at White Marsh. You can look for me at the headwaters of Riviere Morte. De Smet fumed. The frontier will chew you up and spit you out as a juicy ball of phlegm. Your bones will wither and rot before I can even return to find them. And now, march back up to the party. Nicollet did not look back, but as he neared the doorway, de Smet called out, Wahanaten. Nicollet stopped in his tracks and spun back around. his tails flapping like the wings of a bird landing. Is that supposed to mean something to me? Wahanaten. He is an elderly Sioux chief, and the last of a generation that lived the last time Halley's Comet crossed the skies, DeSmet said, standing on the edge of the darkness. Halley's Comet? What does that have to do with anything? DeSmet finished his point. If God wills that a man such as yourself will do his bidding, then seek Chief Wahanaten. Perhaps you will have better luck finding him. Nicollet nodded and turned back to the party, where he saw Mary Ann Easton making a beeline for him. Where have you been? There is a man you need to meet. He is looking for mapmakers. Chapter 13. John James Hebert, like many of the men in the room, wore a military uniform. From what Nicollet could tell, he wore the rank of colonel, although determining the branch of military proved more elusive. A man in his mid-40s, the tight-fitting uniform no longer flattered him, which Nicollet took as a sign he was more of a bureaucrat rather than a soldier. Colonel Hebert, this is my handsome friend, Professor Nicollet, the astronomer, Mary Ann Easton began. It sounds like the two of you are long overdue for a meeting. I'll let you gentlemen speak about matters of great importance, and I'll return in a few minutes to rescue one of you from the other. She flitted away and was immediately swept up by another man hoping to have her ear. Bonjour, Major Hebert, Nicollet said, extending his hand, which Hebert gripped uncomfortably hard. Hello, Professor Nicollet. Yes, I was hoping we could talk for a few minutes. Of course, have a seat. I did not expect to meet you here tonight. Hebert scoffed at the lie. Oh, dear. Did you happen to have a chance to review my qualifications? I've conducted a few experiments with Ferdinand Hassler, and he told me about your interests in mapping. Your qualifications are quite impressive, Professor Nicollet. As a member of several scientific communities, I know you are spoken of quite highly. In fact, I'm glad to have met you here tonight. Tell me about your idea of using a barometer for map making. He is interested. It really isn't an idea I invented, but one that I borrowed from a mentor of mine, Alexander von Humboldt. Well, it's a good thing that von Humboldt didn't apply for the job then, Hebert bluntly joked. Nicollet took a few minutes to explain how barometric pressure readings could be used to create a map that showed elevation instead of just mapping based on 2 dimensions of longitude and latitude. When finished, he felt certain he'd done enough to secure his funding. But Hebert did not seem impressed. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Nicollet. Professor Nicollet. Given your age, I honestly do not think you are the right man for the job. I am looking for soldier scientists, men who have military background and can defend themselves in hostile Indian territory. Indians do not frighten me, sir. On contrary, they make the assignment into Dakota Territory even more interesting to me. Over the last few months, I've read all about Indian tribes out on the frontier. Really? What do you know about the frontier? Governmental policies and population growth caused a dozen Indian tribes to stack up along the shores of the Mississippi. The Chippewa, Menominee, Winnebago, Fox, Sauk, Potawatomi, Iowa, and Illinois Indians all sided with the English during the War of 1812, only to be ultimately defeated by the United States Army. A generation prior to that, these same tribes sided with the French, only to lose to the American colonists and English. I think I understand why they are hostile. All of these tribes that once existed as far east as the Hudson are now stacked up against the Mississippi, standing in the way of progress. Progress, yes, manifest destiny. Do you know why they were so foolish as to listen to the English and enter into a war against the United States? They were desperate. Hebert chuckled. We were the lesser of two evils. I'm not sure that I follow. There is a tribe that lives on the other side of the Mississippi River called the Oceti-Sakowin, the Seven Council Fires. Until recently, their kingdom stretched several hundred miles from the Great Lakes all the way to the Black Hills near the Rocky Mountains. All those tribes you just rattled off affectionately refer to this nation as the Serpents, or the Sioux, as your French predecessors called them. Lewis and Clark called them the most warlike and vilest miscreants of the savage races. Have you read the recent news about the Black Hawk War in Illinois and Iowa? Black Hawk is the leader of the Fauq and Sox, Nicollet answered, having read about it in the newspapers. Yes, it's been a brutal, bloody fight down to almost the last man. Black Hawk would rather face our bullets than migrate further west. What does that tell you about the Sioux, Mr. Nicollet? Wahanaten, the last great Sioux chief. It tells me that the United States government might want to rethink its policy towards the native population. The words came tumbling out faster than Nicollet could stop them. Well, that should end this conversation. At this, J.J. Hebert laughed aloud. You've only read about the noble savage in your books, haven't you? Nicollet nodded in defeat, knowing he debated when he should have been flattering. I'm afraid you are a victim of poor timing, Hebert said with an eye roll. Are you familiar with George Fanshawe? The English geologist? Yes, unfortunately for you, I recently hired him to produce a map of the mineral resources of the Louisiana Purchase and to produce a map of the elevated country between the Missouri and Red River watersheds. He has already departed for the upper Mississippi. With a stolen map? Or is this mere coincidence? Nicollet's heart sank. I am sure he will do a quality job. My department is in its infancy, Professor Nicollet. If I am to get more funding, I need to send men like Hassler and Fanshawe to meet early success before the government purses open up for more needed expansion. I've seen these maps. You have? Hebert acted surprised. Tell me what I have purchased with my investment. Mr. Fanshawe is a reputable geologist. Who am I to question his work? But, Hebert pressed, I'm sure the good old guide's information was, meant well. But, Nicollet sighed in polite resignation, I believe my predecessors made a monstrous blunder in describing the mouth and watersheds of some of these rivers. Oh, that was bold. Hebert weighed his claim. Well, in the days to come, the United States military will need accurate maps before sending men into Indian country. The accuracy of the watershed could be a matter of life and death to these commanders, and knowing elevation is paramount. That is why I would like to hire you to train some of my officers in barometric techniques. The wind left Nicollet's sails. A teaching position? No. I need to personally investigate these rivers. Excusez-moi, but I was under the impression that you were looking for a man to lead this expedition. That is correct, Professor Nicollet, but I simply do not believe you are the right man to lead this expedition. May I ask why? Hebert clenched his teeth for a moment. A colleague wrote to me about my idea of hiring you. He felt your Catholicism would prejudice any discoveries you might make in fields other than barometrics. A colleague? Nicollet repeated to himself. Could it be the murdering thief? I can assure you, Colonel Hebert, that my dedication to scientific pursuits is not blinded by any belief that I have. I might believe in the guiding hand of Providence, but I am a man of science, rest assured. I respect your abilities, which is why I want you to train my officers. America is founded upon the separation of church and state. How do I know you will limit your studies to matters of geography? Nicollet nodded, taking it all in stride. I have indeed passed the middle years of my life. I do believe that there is a hand behind the design of nature and the acts of providence seen in my life. Yes, I am not a robust man, but I can assure you that, having grown up in the foothills of the Alps, that I am made of stronger metal, far stronger than it may seem. I have grit. So you will not accept the job to train my officers? You need me to lead this expedition, Colonel Hebert. Science is not made like bread, not with an oven and a recipe and in need of the risks. A man in the field needs to know not only the techniques, but must be able to adjust his method to many circumstances. You want a man with the experience to develop new strategies for unexpected situations. Just then, Marianne Easton swept over to their table and sat down across from the two men. Joseph, you need to come back and save me from these bad dancers. You see, Mr. Hebert? You see, Colonel Hebert? Why hire an amateur when you can have a master? Nicollet stood and extended his right hand to Marianne, who bowed slightly to her. She giggled and took his hand. Nicollet turned back to Hebert, who was clearly amused with his timely remark. Perhaps time will show you that I am a man of science. If it makes you feel better, a priest at St. Mary's College questioned my dedication to Catholicism because of my close friendship with Humboldt. Nicollet winked at Hebert and walked off with the most eligible maiden in America. So, did you get the job? Marianne Easton asked. Not yet, but I think I am getting closer. All I need to do is prove myself to him. I have an idea, Marianne announced. Please tell. You have something none of these other men have. Money? No, she chuckled. You are a celebrity. America is built by lumberjacks who want to be aristocrats. And with the coming of Halley's Comet, everyone wants a piece of your sophistication. Wherever you go, you will be received as an esteemed guest. Just announce your intentions and go. I'm afraid I currently do not have any funds to travel where I want to go. Could you afford to travel to Georgia? Georgia? I don't want to go to Georgia. Yes, you do. I apologize for forgetting that our controversies are lost upon strangers to your shores. To our shores. Do you see Mr. Poncet? The two men he is talking to are politicians from Georgia and South Carolina. South Carolina is upset about tariffs placed upon them, and Georgia is trying to claim as much land as possible from the Cherokee after the Indian Removal Act. Joel is probably trying to negotiate peace between the two rival states. If you were to show up in Georgia, there would be a bidding war for you. Cherokee? I want to visit the Sioux. A bidding war? Throw caution to the wind, Joseph. Go to Georgia. Chapter 14. Johnny Fremont rode up to the scientific camp on the finest horse from the plantation stables. It had taken more time than expected to find the Pied Piper of Savoy, and the heat of South Carolina sun pounded down upon his layers of civility, threatening to strip away all the lies that covered him. Seeing the group of scientists in the distance, Fremont reached down to his canteen and took a sip of water, and then used his handkerchief to dab away at the sweat that collected along the brow of his hat. Use your assets, he'd been told in the morning, and what fine assets they were. Approaching the Santee River, Fremont held his horse at the edge of the water to observe the band of scientists and also take measure of his appearance. At 20, he barely needed to shave, but having done so, his skin glistened in the reflection upon the river, accenting his notorious dimples. Despite the ride, his dark hair still behaved itself, parted down the middle but swept back. Use my assets. Professor Nicollet, Fremont announced loudly enough so that all the men gathered on the southern side of the river could hear him. Good afternoon. Against a backdrop of dogwood trees, the entire expedition took note, with some waving and others continuing their task. A young man with a tripod in one hand and knobs of a with a notebook in one hand and knobs of a tripod in another, recorded the measurements while a local surgeon waved 2 white flags at the mouth of a small creek. A few yards away, at the shoreline of the Santee River, 2 local chemists searched for fossils and rocks to add to Nicollet's collection of specimens gathered during the expedition through the Great Smoky Mountains. Sitting in the drooping arms of a massive angel oak tree, a local scientist instructed the newest recruit to the team on the science behind the Humboldtian technique. Where is Professor Nicollet? Fremont gently spurred his borrowed horse into the current of the Santee River to get a better look. They all know I've come to take him away. Most of these men don't even know me, yet know what I am. Professor Nicollet! A hand emerged from tall grass, and Fremont steered toward it. From his position atop the horse, he found Professor Nicollet lying on his back, face up to the sun, with a hat placed over his face. Has the mountain goat of Currahee been bested by the South Carolina sun? Nicollet quickly removed his hat, quickly lifted his hat from his face, squinting to say, "Ah, the young mathematician, Johnny, enchanté. It's a pleasure to see you again, Professor Nicollet. When I heard you'd entered South Carolina during your tour of the South, I had to come and see you again and invite you to stay at one of the finest plantations for an early Christmas party." A Christmas party? Merci beaucoup. My legs are still strong, but I couldn't catch my breath. The humidity near the ocean has made it even more difficult to breathe. Without an invitation, Johnny Fremont jumped off his horse and lay down in the grass beside Nicollet. Did you ever find Dugas? Unfortunately, yes. He wandered off to relieve himself in private and got lost. For all of his sophistication, he doesn't have any common sense out in nature. These other men might be more acclaimed scientists, but they are all great fools. So you are following the watershed from Currahee all the way down to the Atlantic. Is that why you've come this far? You've hit the nail on the head, Johnny. I have learned a great deal about mapping as well as choosing traveling companions during this trip. I am beginning to worry my ambitions might exceed my ability. Nonsense. As a college dropout, it took me the better part of a month to understand what you were doing with the data from your barometer. But now that I understand the math, it is pure genius, Professor Nicollet. Stolen knowledge from an actual genius. Yes, I have a hard time picturing Alexander von Humboldt climbing up Currahee or Lookout Mountain, nor can I picture any of these men lasting a few more weeks. What are you suggesting, Johnny? Nicollet asked, opening his eyes to the 20-year-old beside to the young. Okay, already established that. Opening his eyes. I heard that you once were the apprentice of Pierre Simon Laplace, the legendary astronomer, and that he helped guide your career. Let me be your apprentice. Johnny Freeman had the narrow, angular face of an athlete or a soldier, not that of a mathematician. His piercing eyes contrasted with his dimpled grin and infectious laugh. I already said that. If the rumors about Nicollet are true about Nicollet, this might work. Who says I am looking for an apprentice? Nicollet boldly answered. I'm not blind, Professor Nicollet. I understand why you are mapping Cherokee country. You do. For such a young man, you must possess great wisdom to understand me so well. I saw you cry when we visited New Echota. None of the other scientists felt the pain and loss of the Cherokee people the way you mourned what was being done to them. I realized then you were neither a dispassionate scientist nor were you a crook taking advantage of an opportunity. You saw the Cherokee as your fellow men, didn't you? I did, Johnny. I didn't realize you saw my reaction until now. It made me realize you've given much thought to the state of the Indian in America. When I saw how you viewed them, it became obvious that mapping the South was an exercise. You mean to go west, don't you? West? I could barely survive Nashville. I've dreamed of going west since I was a boy. I want to see the frontier and meet the wild Indian tribes like the Sioux and the Chippewa. I want to make a name for myself in a land where no one knows who I am. A name for yourself? Aren't you proud of the name Fremont? The sins of the father. Isn't that why you've come to America? To make a new name for yourself? Everyone who can read knows the name of the famous astronomer Nicollet. But we've also heard rumors about why you left Paris. Rumors hang over my head as well. Nicollet grew silent for a few moments. Even if I were looking to take an apprentice, and even if I were planning on going west, I could never afford to pay you. I can barely afford to take care of myself, Johnny. I'm nearly destitute. I've spent months in the South trying to make a name for myself so that I can secure patronage to fund all my studies. All I've received so far is charity. Oh, Fremont said, disappointed. I just assumed you were a wealthy aristocrat traveling the world. I didn't mean to beg you for a job. Lying on his back in the grass, Nicollet suddenly felt like a cheap whore as Nicollet, once again, gave him no indications that the rumors of his sexual preference were true. In disgust, Fremont stood back up and brushed off his pants. Nicollet shielded his eyes as he looked up at him. If I were to hire an apprentice, you'd be my first hire. Don't say that. You have no idea what kind of man I am. You don't mean that. Yes, I do. You are a skilled mathematician, and you seem at home. You seem at home on a mountain peak or beside a river. I have dreams of seeing the frontier and meeting the wild Indian tribes before the greed of the white man steals everything from the red man. I am looking for magic out there on the frontier. Why have you returned to the expedition? I thought you had acquired employment. Yes, I work for Mr. Ponset now. Joel Ponset? Do you know him? Yes, I met him last year at a party in Washington, D.C. How do you know Mr. Ponset? I've known Joel since I was a boy. He only recently married, and without any children of his own, he's taken down on their luck boys like me and helped them find their way in life. He helped me attain a position at the local college before I was expelled for an intimate relationship with the president's daughter. It was rumor, of course, but with my name, everyone believed it. Nicollet sat up on the grass. Ponset sent you all the way out here to invite me to a Christmas party. Why would he do that? Honestly, I think the two of you might have a lot in common. What exactly would we have in common? Nicollet asked. Fremont laughed, seeing that Nicollet took offense at his playful double entendre. He is a world traveler and a scientist. If anything, you must see his greenhouse. He has botanical specimens from all over the world. He's a remarkable man. So, all I need to do is flash my dimples and bat my eyes, and the man will hand over money? Nicollet asked, dishing it right back. Ponset is a discreet man, a private man, a gentleman through and through. In a way, he reminds me a lot of you, always focused on his work. He was a congressman, and most recently, the minister to Mexico. Joel knows everybody. Will you come to the party? Chapter 15. He's in the greenhouse, Johnny Freeman said over the noise of the party. He wants to speak with you, alone. Do you want me to come with you? I'll be fine, Nicollet said. If I can handle Alexander von Humboldt, I certainly can manage Joel Ponset. Upon arriving from their 30-mile trip to Stateburg, both men had been immediately welcomed and given rooms, but not by Ponset. When they arrived at the plantation, Fremont had a private conversation with his mentor, who stayed in the greenhouse rather than attend his own party. The mansion was then filled with more than 100 other guests, and by the time Christmas music began to play, hundreds filled the ballroom. Outside the party, the wind and the rain beat against the plantation, making Nicollet notice how the swell of heat and music rivaled nature herself. Yet in the protection of the little greenhouse, the environment was controlled, producing perfection unmatched elsewhere in the world. The glass and green frame kept the air humid and warm. On the ride from the Santee River, Nicollet had picked Fremont's brain prior to arriving at the Ponset plantation, so it came as no surprise to see hundreds of red and green plants filling the greenhouse. A remarkable man, Nicollet reflected. Across the length of the greenhouse, Joel Ponset carefully pruned his prized possession, the poinsettia. Flor de noche buena, Ponset said without even turning. As with the Franciscan friars in Mexico, the local Baptist preachers have quickly adopted the plant into their Christmas traditions, which means on the morrow, my inventory of plants will all but disappear. Left alone to nature, the plant would end up looking like a weed, but with a little patience, I will hopefully produce another crop of masterpieces by next Christmas. Your skill with the scalpel is as impressive as your skill with the mentor. Young Mr. Fremont said you'd like to speak with me. Joel Ponset hovered over a microscope to study sap residue on a slide. Yes, are you enjoying the party, Professor Nicollet? Of all the states I've visited in America so far, South Carolina is certainly the most accepting of the French, and until this evening, the weather has been delicious. You must remember that the French liberated South Carolina from the English in the Revolutionary War. Young Mr. Fremont's father was French. Bien sûr. With a name like Ponset, I would assume you are French also. Ponset seemed to tense for a moment, but only to hastily change slides in the microscope. I am an American, Professor Nicollet, born on American soil. But yes, the French are indeed popular here in Charleston. My wife and I are pleased that you found time to visit us, now that political tensions have eased. American politics are still a mystery. Things are improved. The talk of secession over tariffs and taxes was breaking my heart. I'm glad to see the warships beginning to leave Charleston Harbor again. I saw war rip apart my country twice in my lifetime, and I do not wish to see it destroy such a beautiful country as America. Peace can be fickle. I've been hearing tales of the Pied Piper of Savoy leading the youth all over the South, over hill and vale, with his barometer instead of a pipe. Nicollet chuckled at the metaphor. Is that how I am seen? All of Dixie is ablaze with stories of the French explorer. I was told you were nicknamed the French Mountain Goat after your studies of Currahee Mountain. Fremont told him that. No, Nicollet blushed and shook his head. I broke my ribs on my own tripod falling out of the window. All things considered, I am glad to have Southern hospitality to nurse me back to good health and spirits. Thank heaven for the protection that has followed me everywhere. I have suffered much, but not from men whom I found good to me. You're welcome to stay at the mansion as long as you would like, Ponset continued, speaking without looking at Nicollet. What does he want? You are too kind. Ponset remained focused on his work for several moments before pushing away his microscope. He glanced at Nicollet and then focused on his plants. Botany is a vastly different field of study than astronomy. I have heard you are quite reputable in the field of astronomy. that you've done studies on a comet that flies by Earth once in a lifetime. I stand upon the backs of greater men, Nicollet shrugged. It is Halley's Comet you speak of, and I have only polished theories already put on paper. I understand. Nicollet looked up from the green leaves of his plant. Theories can bounce around for centuries until the right man unlocks their meaning. How many supposedly great men have made scientific claims, only to be disproven by a better man? I hear you have combined your astronomy skills with meteorology skills to create a new sort of map. You know about the map. I am an international diplomat. I have cultivated hundreds of relationships in Washington and abroad, and they all like to whisper. The world is about to become much smaller thanks to science and your maps. How are yours different? Topography maps show elevation as well as longitude and latitude. With a baseline comparison of a known elevation, I can take readings of barometric pressure at a certain location and compare that to my barometric readings to determine height, factoring in the effects of weather upon the readings. I have found considerable success in mapping the territory of the Cherokee. When your man Fremont found me, I was charting the descent of the Santee River back to the ocean. America is like a great Christmas present waiting to be opened by a child. We know the general size and shape, but what lies within? That is the great mystery. The great mystery. Poncet repeated the phrase as if tasting it. The great mystery is which of the Indian tribes will try to kill you first. The words chilled Nicollet, but he brushed them off. The world is made up of all sorts of people. Indians are no different. They are barbarians, sir. I have fought the savages, including most recently in the Seminole Wars. Now, those same savages are once again causing problems, like a pest limiting the growth of a plant. Humanity needs a little pruning to become what it is meant to be. So yes, I do find your topographical maps quite intriguing. How did you find the Cherokee during your trip to Georgia? How did the noble savage strike you? The Cherokee were poor, but so too are many when their land is taken from them, either forcefully or politically. Their time has come and gone, and now greater people will show them a new theory. Soon, they will be removed west of the Mississippi. How do I ask him for money after he said that? Nicollet took a moment to gather his thoughts. I hear you're working on a national museum from the inheritance of the late chemist James Smithson. You're familiar with Smithson? Poncet asked. I am. He was a bachelor like us, married to science, Nicollet teased. Alas, I have found Mary, but it is doubtful I will have any children. My legacy will have to be the works I leave behind, like Smithson's museum. It will be the nation's attic, dedicated to men of science who are helping to shape a new world out of an old weed. You are a man of science, aren't you, Professor Nicollet? Je suis désolé, but I must get to the heart of the matter. I'm seeking funding for a scientific expedition, and you would like me to help fund it? Oui. Have you tried the offices of the U.S. Corps of Topographical Engineers, Colonel Hebert? Nicollet bit his lip. Before he could answer, the doors burst open, and a very wet Johnny Freeman entered. Ah, Professor Nicollet, we were talking about you. Excuse me, Professor Ambassador Poncet. A few of your guests would like to ask him a question. Fremont had Nicollet by the arm and didn't seem to wait for permission. Just as the two of them reached the doorway, Poncet called out, "One moment, Johnny. After careful consideration, I've decided that the time has come for you to leave this nest. I've arranged a new teaching position for you, one where you might have a chance to learn a trade and also go on a great adventure." Is Poncet jealous? Have I ensnared the affections of his young protege? Nicollet wondered. Where will I be teaching? Fremont asked, his hand still on the handle of the exterior door. Now that the nullification crisis has ended and the Charleston harbor no longer needs to be secured, You will serve on the USS Natchez under Commander Shubrick. A math teacher on a warship? Thank you, sir, Fremont said. I won't forget the kindness you've shown me. Professor Nicollet, Ponset added, go back to Washington. Show Colonel Hebert the work you've been doing here in the South. Perhaps it will change his mind. The wheels of government move slowly. Give it time. Thank you, Ambassador Ponset. I will consider your advice. Once outside, between the stillness of the greenhouse and the joy of the party, Fremont stopped. Perhaps it is a good thing he said no. With Joel, there are always strings attached. You knew he was going to reject my request? Fremont nodded. Earlier, I asked if I could join you on your Mississippi expedition. Now, I'm serving on the USS Natchez. With the harbor now open, I would not go back to Washington like a beggar. Take a ship around the Gulf and go to St. Louis. Someone will hire you. Chapter 16. St. Louis, known as the Gateway of the West, is older than any other city in North America by hundreds of years. Established at the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri River, it controls the fourth largest river system in the world. The modern American city also contains the ruins of Cahokia, which exceeded London in population hundreds of years before Columbus arrived on the continent. For generations, the city belonged to the French territory of La Louisiane, named after the French king Louis IX. French fur traders Pierre Nicollet and Auguste Chouteau established the city in 1764, but following the 7 Years' War, the ownership of the city and territory shifted from France to Spain, back to France, and eventually to the United States as part of the Louisiana Purchase. In the 1830s, the uniquely French city witnessed an influx of international immigrants as steamships and paddle boats traveled up the Mississippi from New Orleans and down the Ohio River from Tennessee. One of these new immigrants to the city was Joseph Nicollet, who finally arrived in 1835 following a cholera outbreak that left him stranded in New Orleans. At least the stars have finally aligned for a good impression, Nicollet thought as he rested in his simple hotel room. His steamer trunk still held his sextant and barometer, but a cheap telescope he'd purchased in the French Quarter had done the trick, announcing the arrival of a world-renowned astronomer to a city starved for attention, just as Halley's Comet neared Earth. 2 weeks earlier, after securing a cheap room for a 6-month lease, he hauled the telescope down to the docks near dusk and pretended to take measurements of a cosmos barely visible through the worthless instrument. 2 days later, the Jesuit associates of Father De Smet knocked at his door, begging him to tour their college campus. By the end of the tour, they offered Nicollet a paid teaching position, which he nearly accepted due to his extreme poverty. A few days later, after visiting St. Louis College, another stranger knocked on his door, Pierre Chouteau, Jr. The grandson of the city's founder, Chouteau took it upon himself to meet the traveling celebrity and show him around town. He even invited him to a party that Saturday, in exchange for a promise to give the family a private viewing of Halley's Comet. Chouteau gifted a set of family texts chronicling the influence on the French upon America. Mute. Although his fiddle was silent, his belly empty, and his clothes a bit ragged, poverty allowed him to spend hours reading about the history of the Missouri River Valley and the Great Lakes. When another knock came at the door, he held the Annals by André Joseph Pennicott in his hands. Opening the door, he came face to face with a towering fellow with straight ebony hair that swept over his left eye. "Professor Nicollet," the man said in perfect English, revealing a chipped tooth. His steely eyes studied him impassively, allowing Nicollet to note the giant's dark complexion, which revealed his heritage, even if Nicollet could not place the specific tribe. "Yes," Nicollet said, taking in every detail about the handsome figure in front of him. Although the stranger wore deerskin clothes, they were in no way barbaric. A crafted collar, cuffs, frills down the seams of the arm, and small little ornamental buttons. Some sort of leather talisman hung around his neck, and a pistol was shoved into the man's belt. Just like the Cherokee, the man had a smooth face without beard or mustache, but the eyes were fair instead of brown. A métis. He is a half-breed. I've been asked to bring you down to the docks to speak with Captain Billy." "Captain Billy?" Nicollet chuckled. "And what is your name, my friend?" The métis quickly reached down, grabbed the hilt, and leveled the pistol at Nicollet's face. "No questions. Grab your jacket and be quiet." "He doesn't want to kill me, so what does he want?" Nicollet did as commanded, grabbing his jacket, and then closed his door. "We will go out the back door to the alley," the métis said, still with no malevolent attitude beyond the deadly force. Soon Nicollet found himself in a small carriage, side by side with the métis, who nodded to a waiting driver as they climbed in. "Captain Billy? Is this all a prank?" All along the St. Louis levee, crude buildings and warehouses created a wooden wall where everything from buffalo pelts to kegs of alcohol waited to be distributed. A dozen steamships parked, some loading, others unloading. Even at night, bells, steam engines, and shouts of working men filled the air. Even if I shouted for help, everyone is so preoccupied. The somber métis brought him to a small steamship, about 20 feet long, much shorter than a passenger steamship. "My abductor has money. If he wanted me dead, I'd be dead. Whoever this is, he wants to talk. Has the buyer finally come to collect me?" Once aboard the steamship, the métis tossed over the ropes, kicked the vessel away from the docks, and turned the ship upstream. "If necessary, I could jump overboard and swim to shore and hide in the woods until morning." A face slid up the prow of the ship, illuminated by a cigar. It was the face of a European man with a prominent mustache and dark hair. He wore a large hat with a he wore an oversized felt hat with a large feather on one side. "Do you know me, Professor Nicollet?" "Yes, I believe I do," Nicollet said. "You are Captain Billy. I recently saw you from a distance at the Chateau Mansion." "Yes, all of St. Louis has had the opportunity to be introduced to the illustrious astronomer, including many of your enemies." "Enemies? Why would I have enemies?" "That is one of the reasons we're taking this little cruise, to determine if I am one of your enemies. Senator Benton doesn't like you. Now he's far away in Washington, but still finds a way to block your passage. The Chateau family knows you, but aside from a little bit of curiosity, they won't help you either. What do they know about you? What secrets have been whispered to the powerful in St. Louis?" The dark river soon took away all witnesses, leaving the sound of the boiler, the turn of the paddles, and the passage of the water as the only sound. Nicollet found himself shivering, unsure if it was the cold or the terror. Nicollet asked, "How could I be your enemy when I don't even know you?" "I like the anonymity of America. Here, on this river, I am Billy Stewart, an English name." "Is that why you have come to America, Joseph? To make a new name for yourself? To be a different person than you once were?" Stewart continued, "I suppose that does have a certain appeal. America is an alkahest of change for immigrant Europeans. What role did you once play in Europe?" "The spoiled second son of a nobleman." "Sir Billy." "Back in Europe, my father simply bought a captaincy for me, and as a young man, I was ordering older men, sending some of them to their deaths as we held the gate against the forces of Napoleon. None of it was earned, however. The opportunity was purchased. Here on the frontier, respect is earned. I now have friends like Mountain Man Jim Bridger, Wilderness Guy Kit Carson, and Trapper Thomas Fitzpatrick, because I earned their respect through hard work and deeds. Do you think Antoine followed me all the way down here because he is my slave or servant? No. He had watched you for the past several days because I am his friend." "What a dull chase I must have given him," Nicollet said, trying to think of all the places he'd been. "On the contrary, you should have heard Antoine speak of the Basilica of St. Louis. Growing up in the woods and wild of Canada, he'd never seen a church before. Tell me, Professor Nicollet, what does a man of science such as yourself do so often in a church?" "I confess my sins, both minor and egregious, and look to God for guidance as I seek his path for me here in the New World." "You sound like a priest." "Merci beaucoup. As a boy, all I wanted to do was become a priest. But there were few paths that led to priesthood during those years." "Why haven't you married? Everything I've heard claims you are more chaste than most priests." "I have taken a bride. I'd probably be surrounded by grandchildren rather than books if that path hadn't been taken from me. Science is my mistress." "Then it would seem you've been having issues in your relationship." "I certainly didn't expect she'd lead me to a dark river with Billy and Antoine. So, what do you want, Sir William?" "After spending 2 years exploring the West with Mr. Clement, I had planned to return to Cuba and refill my depleted coffers. Then, from across the seas, the good Lord delivered you into my grasp. What do I want? I want what is inside your head." "All you needed to do is ask. We could have a few drinks." "Yes, but so few men are honest, and the truth can be so very loud. Many Native American tribes torture their prisoners over flame. The tribes of America are filled with beautiful people, but they can also be very violent. I once saw Antoine gut an elk in less than 10 minutes. It was horrifying to see what he could do with that knife of his. I wouldn't share a tent with him for 2 days afterwards." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Nicollet said. "What do you want to know?" "Why have you come to St. Louis?" "I'd like to study the upper Mississippi River." "Bah! Excusez-moi? I said bah, and spare me your fucking French phrases. I'll cut off a finger just to spite. The Mississippi River is a dead end. Dozens of explorers have gone there. She is a flirtatious whore with nothing special between her legs. Countless explorers have taken their turns with her. What makes you think you're different than any of them? Your Humboldtian technique?" Nicollet felt his jaw drop. Stewart had done his homework, but also revealed that his faceless rivals had sent their own men, perhaps following the clues written upon the alchemist's map. Antoine, I'm about to ask Professor Nicollet an important question. Have we traveled far enough from the city yet? The giant métis, Antoine Clement, looked back, then at Nicollet, and nodded and flashed his chipped-toothed smile. Why do you want to specifically go to Minnesota? Stewart asked. Not English. Scottish. He already knows the answer. So I'll give him the truth that he wants. Give him more truth than he wants. When I was a little boy, there came a desperate pounding on our door in the middle of the night. Being a young fool, I rushed to the door and flung it open, and there stood 5 Jesuit priests who had managed to escape death from the mob during the early days of the French Revolution. While my father wanted to be rid of them, my mother welcomed them into our house, gave them food and water, and then did something ultimately foolish. Come with me, Nicky, she said, and within moments of answering the door, my mother sent me with the Jesuit priests to a trail leading out of Cluse and into the Alps. She tasked me with leading these heroes of the faith to safety, a journey that would take almost 2 weeks of my life. When I returned, I found my house occupied by men of the Revolution. They weren't the same men who'd raped, tortured, and murdered my mother, but they knew what had happened to her because they told me. They'd buried her in the backyard along the stone fence. Revolutionaries decided the Jesuits needed to be killed, and they tortured my mother to find out where they had gone. She died with her secrets. Choosing to save her son and the Jesuits, I led to safety. So go ahead, Mr. Stewart. Threaten me with violence. Cut my flesh or burn it. But while you hurt me, I will be thinking of my mother. And I will be thinking of my aunt, Stewart said as his finger played with the curl at the end of his mustache. If you'd like to avoid answering the question while trying to create an emotive bond between yourself and your captor, then let me share a story also. I hated my Uncle William, after whom I am named. He was a strange man, since he was wealthy. Friends of the family called him eclectic, as he wrote poetry as a profession and spent the family's wealth on his library of everything old and odd. My mother married a Stewart, a baronet of Mirthley and Blair, and her sister, Lady Margaret Drummond, suffered from the same peculiar mind as Uncle William, which is why, after obtaining some of his strange artifacts from his library, she came to visit Professor Jean-Nicolas Nicollet in Paris. Now tell me, who do you work for? Chapter 17. The big knife slid back and forth across a whetstone as Nicollet tried to focus on his story. Antoine Clement kept himself busy sharpening his knife against the whetstone. That man would kill me without prejudice. Nicollet decided as he looked over at the métis. In the prow of the boat. Nicollet managed to withhold the specific details about the map while also revealing a theory he'd conjured. The Long River, William Drummond Stewart repeated after hearing the story. Yes, finding it unlocks the puzzle. Lahontan and Le Sueur implied that the copper mine was built off of a tributary of the Mississippi River. But in the 1680s, the Mississippi River was uncharted, with only a few landmarks, such as Lake Pepin, which is why it is like searching for a needle in a haystack, Nicollet Stewart asked. Before you can begin to search, you have to find the right haystack. So the church wanted you to find the right haystack. Yes, the location of Fort La Houlier. I was told not to concern myself with acquiring the treasure. And what is the treasure they seek? The map did not clearly answer, Nicollet answered honestly, even if he had been able to deduce its subject. The obvious value of the map was its age, which I assessed to be hundreds of years old, if not older. The mysteries written upon it also connect to occult lore, so anyone with an obsession with alchemy or Grail lore would see it as the penultimate collector's item. And its actual value? Before I tell you that, there are things I'd like you to answer for me. I have openly told you what I know about Lady Drummond's map, but trust is a two-way street, William. If you and I are to trust each other, there are a few questions I need answered also, such as, I'm in a race against forces I do not understand. Someone wanted to buy the map from your aunt. Someone killed her to obtain it. Who am I competing against? Even though Stewart's face was long and thin, his eyes were cold and empty. Yet Nicollet could see him sorting through the pieces of the puzzle. Most of the men belonged to Masonic organizations, such as the Freemasons, which only serves as a vetting organization for men of true power, like my Uncle William. Freemasons. Surely a Frenchman knows about secret societies, or else your kings would still rule the kingdom. Of course, but why would Freemasons have an interest in this alchemist map? They don't. Even to men who decorate their lives with arcane symbolism, the alchemist map would seem foolish. But the organization that created Freemasonry understands it, which is why they are 2 steps ahead of you. How do you know this? My Uncle William, of course. I am competing against my own family in a way. When I was young, after sneaking into his room or library, I wanted to follow in his footsteps, to become a Freemason and then to join the Order of Eos. The Order of Eos. That is the answer you seek. I don't know if they are the ones who wanted to buy the map or the ones who killed her for it. But the Order of Eos is behind some very strange things. Eos, the ancient goddess. What is the Order of Eos? As you probably figured, their name refers to the dawn, as a reference to the east, or a reference to the beginning, but not as a devout Catholic would see it. They are a religious order of sorts, with connections that weave through Freemasonry, Templar Knights, Cathars, and the Gnostics of old. A friend of mine once told me that the art of alchemy goes back to the pyramids of ancient Egypt, Nicollet said, feeling a wave of depression splash against the rocks, despite the waning threat from Stewart and Clement. The newspaper said Champollion died from a sudden stroke, but I worry he spoke openly about what he saw. Stewart shrugged. I don't understand what they want any more than I understand what the map will reveal. As it turns out, I was not worthy of such secret knowledge. Not worthy? My poor character, I was told. I suppose I was a bit of a sneak, which is why I know as much as I do. Lurking around my uncle's library taught me enough, but it seems my sexual appetites prevented me from being trusted with the Drummond family secrets. Love one of the stable boys, and they all look away. Get a servant girl pregnant, and they all but cut you out of the family. Nicollet looked long at Stewart and then glanced at Clement playing with his knife at the prow of the boat. Antoine and I will soon be parting ways. As a métis, he understands what it is like not to belong. But I assured him I will return as soon as I can afford it. If the Order of Eos has already been to Minnesota and departed, the treasure must be up another western tributary of the Mississippi. Since I have resolved not to kill you, come with me to Cuba for the winter. I will depart at the end of the year. Next spring, we'll go on an adventure together. And trade Humboldt for Stuart. No. Cuba is the wrong direction, unfortunately. My destination is still north. I was asked to investigate the truth of the legend, not to acquire the stone. So be it, Stuart said with a shrug. You can be bait. When they kill you, I'll know where to hunt. The abduction ended a few hours after it began, and when the small steamer returned to the levee, Nicollet stepped back onto the dock, knowing he'd dodged death. So what now, Professor Nicollet? Stuart said as he helped Nicollet off the boat and onto the dock. For almost 5 years, I've carried the burden of the alchemist's map with me, and there are many secrets I'd like to share. I thank you for believing me, and I'd like to trust you as well. If you'd like to know what men seek with this map, I will share my knowledge with you, but not under threat, and not until I know I can trust you. What can I do to prove my trust? Meet me tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at the corner of Maryland and Newstead Avenue. For what? To determine how badly you want to know the truth. Chapter 18. Lord William Drummond Stuart tried to sleep in the musty old bed, but only tossed and turned. He'd grown used to the lumps and smell of the bed, and the foul air of the hotel room. Tonight, he struggled to sleep because he was alone. Oh, how I hate you, Joseph Nicollet. Out on the streets of St. Louis, he'd heard Saturday night begin to come alive. Drunken brawls, giggling whores, and loudmouth braggarts filled the streets while he suffered in the third floor of a pathetic hotel room. To hell with this hermitage, Stuart thought, throwing aside the blankets. Tonight, Captain Billy is going to play. The street lights provided enough light for him to find the kerosene lamp, which soon illuminated the modest hotel room, purposely poor except for a table stacked with texts meant to torture him day and night like a Silesi. Even the wardrobe was pathetic, filled with little vests, little jackets, and little pants, but Stuart found a loose-fitting white shirt and an oversized pair of trousers that rode up his ankles. I'll have to let my charm do all the work. Stuart walked over to the little mirror, thinning out the tips of his mustache and sweeping his thinning black hair to one side. I don't even know you anymore, Stuart said to his reflection. It had been 20 days since he found Nicollet waiting at the corner of Maryland and Newstead Avenues. Standing with his arms crossed in the shadow of the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis. After hearing the proposition, he'd told Nicollet to go fuck off loudly enough that a dozen churchgoers gasped as they walked toward the front door. He and Clement waited outside for Mass to end before deriding Nicollet for such a suggestion. Even if I believe in heaven and hell, Stuart complained later that Sunday, my hypocrisy would immediately damn me just for walking into that place. Churches were built for sinners, not saints, Nicollet countered. For me to tell you the truth about the alchemist's map, I must first determine whose side you are on. Nicollet went on like that for the next few days, and, like a chaste whore, kept giving him teases of lore with conditions, flirting with the largest theories without giving it all away. Christina Battersby had once denied him for weeks on end, only to end up as the mother of his bastard child, George. Stewart assumed Nicollet was simply a harder nut to crack. By the end of the week, though, Stewart agreed to simply step inside the cathedral on a Friday. Nicollet only intended on showing Clement and Stewart around the wondrously new cathedral, but a sassy nun and a snarky young priest brought a ferocious defense from Nicollet, who championed Stewart's honor as of his own. By the time the squabble ended, Nicollet sat with Stewart and Clement in the plush offices of Bishop Joseph Rosati. An act of contrition, perhaps, Nicollet offered to the bishop. "I'm not even Catholic," Stewart voiced, thinking he'd found an exit from the frenzy of the vicious mongoose that defended him. "Well, we shall soon remedy that," Nicollet declared, while Clement grinned. The act of contrition turned into a fortnight of silence, poverty, and Nicollet's favorite act, chastity. Nicollet swapped hotels with Stewart, leaving him his books and dank room, while Nicollet took the multi-room suite across the river. Took his. Yet, even in the lap of luxury, Nicollet remained restless, stealing Clement for visits to the local Potawatomi reservation on the edge of town, where Nicollet could learn the ways of the Mississippi River Chippewa from their displaced Anishinaabe cousins from Michigan. Now, Stewart approached the door, ready to break his vows. What good is a confession if you have nothing to confess? While he could have sated his lusts with Antoine Clement, Stewart realized his weakness had not been sexual, but social. He missed his conversations with the little scientist. Stewart adjusted his shirt button, leaving him a bit of dark chest hair at the top of the opening. He rummaged through Nicollet's belongings until he found enough to buy a drink. He grabbed 2 personal items, the Knight Companion Grand Cross Star for his bravery at Hougoumont, and his trusty boot dagger, which he'd owned even longer. One could start a conversation, the other could end it. Time for Captain Billy to play. The devilish grin on his face vanished when he saw a man standing in the hotel hallway. The young man shifted toward the stairs as if ready to run. His brown hair was greasy and matted, and his prominent chin quivered. "What do you want?" Stewart asked. "Joseph Nicollet?" the man asked with a slight Cajun accent. He wore a soiled plaid shirt and suspenders. "What of it?" Stewart huffed. The Cajun reached behind his back and produced a flintlock pistol. His palm swept over the firing mechanism and the barrel leveled at Stewart's face. "The Russian sends his regards." Just then, another hotel door opened, and a fat older woman in a draping nightgown joined as a witness to the assassination attempt. The Cajun's fingers tightened around the pistol. "So this is how I die," Stewart wondered a moment before the hammer fell, sparking the flint, which ignited the gunpowder in a flash of flame. The discharge erupted from the barrel in thunder and lightning, and its force caught Stewart in the forehead, blinding him and knocking him off balance. The fat woman screamed. "Strange. How can I hear her without a brain?" The residue in his eyes vanished with a few blinks, leaving him staring at the baffled Cajun assassin. "Is half my head missing? Is that why he gawks?" Stewart reached to his boot, and when he came up with the knife, the Cajun bolted for the stairs. Stewart ran after, still in a crouch, but his quarry spun so quickly he ran into the fat woman, knocking both of them over. Having killed in both war and in the wild, Stewart let his knife do the work, sinking the blade into the man's kidney several times before pulling him off the screaming woman. Go get help, Stewart said to the woman as he grabbed the crawling Cajun by the suspenders and rolled him over, blade to his throat. The young man was dying, though, and worried about more than his mission. Oh, God, I'm dying. I'm dying. Who sent you? Stewart demanded. The Russian. He didn't give me his name. Who the hell are you? Melwin, he grasped the pain. Melwin Devereaux. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry. The Russian, he gave me so much money and promised even more if... While the Cajun writhed in pain, Stewart used his left hand to inspect the bloody crater in his skull. Impossible. His fingers found tissue that was neither flesh nor brain matter. Firing paper. Instead of blood, his fingertips came back black with residue. It's a miracle? Listen, Melwin. Don't die with a guilty conscience. Tell me more about this Russian fellow. Where are you from? Where did you meet him? I'm sorry, sir. It wasn't personal. Oh, it hurts. Oh, it hurts so much. I could just slit his throat and end his suffering. But at the stairs, the fat woman brought a half-dozen men who'd want to hear from the assassin before trusting that Stewart had acted in self-defense. The hands of Providence, Nicollet had told him, repent, convert, and the hand of Providence will guide you as it guides me. Now I really need a drink. Chapter 19. Halley's Comet is a short-period comet visible from Earth every 75 to 76 years. It is named after Edmund Halley, who built upon the work of scientists like Isaac Newton to determine the gravitational effects of sun and planets on the course of the comet. During the winter of 1758, the comet arrived just as Halley predicted. Astronomers could not only predict the return of the comet, but they could also go back in history to recognize the previous appearances. 75 years after Halley, the eyes of St. Louis watched as Nicollet's future hung in the balance. His fingertips held the little screw removed from Brigitte Chateau's prize sewing machine, and by lantern light, he threaded the replacement screw into the hole. With 3 turns, the screw pulled the metal bar back into place. Below the telescope, Nicollet lay upon the cold ground and looked at the collection of legs belonging to the wealthy Chateau family, politicians, clergy, scientists, artists, river barons, and the elites of St. Louis. Even in the presence of King Charles, he had not been so nervous. A hush fell over the crowd as Nicollet crawled out from under the telescope. Our repairs should hold. After a round of applause, Nicollet restored the telescope settings before observing the coming comet. A missing screw had rendered the telescope useless for anything besides gazing at the moon. One by one, the elites of St. Louis came to peek up at the heavens for a closer view of the new star above. Even Sir William Drummond Stewart, waited his turn, and when finished, stood beside his new friend. The screw must have fallen out between here and the Potawatomi camp, Stewart said with a shrug. Nicollet shook his head. If any of them had found a screw, they would have come running into town to tell us. Following the violent end of Stewart's hermitage, the suddenly silent Scotsman had joined Nicollet on a trip to the reservation. When the new telescope arrived, Nicollet insisted on testing it at the reservation prior to a public exhibit at the Chateau Mansion. The aristocracy of St. Louis gasped and giggled like little children. The Potawatomi Indians acted as if Stewart and Nicollet had descended from the heavens with the telescope. One by one, Nicollet took potential financial sponsors behind the eye of the telescope for a viewing of the comet. "Do you know who that man was?" Stewart asked from behind the telescope. "Which man?" "The squatty man with his son. Just a few minutes ago." "The Englishman?" Yes, that was the geologist George Fanshawe. Colonel Abear's man. Why didn't he say something? He's a person of interest, Stuart whispered. Nicollet closed his agape mouth. Is he? Since he arrived in St. Louis, I've had Clement spying on him, and when he arrived at this party, I watched him closely. The more I think of it, the less convinced I am that my nemesis is employed by the government. I'd like to find out who holds Fanshawe's purse strings. It's not a secret in Washington, Nicollet shared. Colonel Abair of the United States Topographical Engineers. We competed for the same expedition funds. With Fanshawe? He is a geologist, an expert in rocks. How could he possibly understand the complicated nature of cartography? Nicollet asked as he helped another guest locate the comet. If he is your man, will you and Antoine be following him to Georgia? Stuart looked away, knowing Nicollet referenced vengeance and murder. No, I spoke with a member of Fanshawe's expedition, a painter named Catlin, who verified the worthless nature of the expedition. A puppet, but not a puppet master. Fanshawe goes to Georgia to supervise the allotment of the newly acquired Cherokee lands. As at this, Nicollet took his eyes from the stars. Acquired or stolen, he has been employed by a flock of vampires, William, as ruthless and unscrupulous as the same land speculators that have stolen the homes of countless Indian nations. Or perhaps I am mistaken. These Georgia gentlemen are not brigands. They are men respected in society who earn so many thousands of dollars that they are respectable. Voila! But when the sun goes down and the stars and moon appear, they are vampires, I tell you. Vampires? A deep baritone voice asked from the crowd, followed by a few chuckles. Nicollet turned to see a thick-chested man wearing an expensive jacket. Over the past few weeks, Stuart helped him navigate the aristocracy of St. Louis, including the recent arrival of Senator Thomas Hart Benton for the holiday. His young daughter Jessie stood at his side. Senator Benton, Nicollet acknowledged from his place next to the telescope. I am pleased that you have come to the viewing. Mademoiselle Benton, you have the opportunity to see Halley Comet twice in your lifetime, unlike the old men gathered around you. We must wait for a moment for a cloud to pass. Senator Benton scowled while he waited. Perhaps these wealthy vampires have turned into bats and pulled the clouds over your eyes, much like your earlier hoax. Now I know who has been blocking my efforts to acquire funding. But which benefactor does he serve? Or is he the villain we seek? Nicollet felt the knife sink into his belly and twist. The corrosion of his career had not stopped upon leaving Paris. I was upset earlier when I called these men vampires. My apologies, Senator Benton. Spare your apologies, Professor Nicollet. I've read all about your pseudoscience. What is that supposed to mean? Nicollet asked, yet knew the answer. Come now, Professor. No need to be coy with us. Your former colleague, Francois Arago, recognized your work. Or was it the work of your friend Herschel? I don't understand. Mr. Griggs, Senator Benton called out, tell everyone what the newspapers in New York are discussing. A man from Benton's entourage glanced at Nicollet and smiled. A short time ago, the New York Sun ran an article about how John Herschel observed bat-like creatures from his observatory at the Cape of Good Hope. Impossible, Nicollet laughed. John would never say such a thing. That is exactly what his wife told the press. She explained to the world that her husband never observed such things, but that the creator of the hoax was undoubtedly a scientist of some esteem who knew the workmanship of such astronomical observances. Are you suggesting that I am behind the hoax? No, Professor, Senator Benton took over from Mr. Griggs' story. We are not suggesting anything. It is the world-renowned astronomer Francois Arago at the meeting of the Academy of Sciences that named you the originator of the hoax. He claimed that no one else in America had the technical knowledge and that only Joseph Nicollet could have perpetrated such a convincing yarn. I am being undone by this man. Could he be my elusive enemy that stole the alchemist's map? I am surprised Arago would admit I had enough knowledge to perpetuate such a hoax. Even a world away, he is threatened by my shadow. Alas, I have been on the lower Mississippi all these months and unable to create such a fable. The crowd chuckled. The cloud passed, and soon the dour Senator Benton and his lovely daughter went back inside the mansion. Senator Benton is friends with quite a few vampires, Stuart quipped. Yet does he mock me for political or personal reasons? Professor Nicollet, a tall priest said, walking to the front of the line from the rear entrance of the mansion. My name is Father Vandevelde. I am a teacher at St. Louis College. Don't worry, Father, Stuart said. We're taking good care of your telescope. We'll bring it back to the college first thing tomorrow morning. No, I'm not here for that. You see, I am a friend of Father De Smet. De Smet? Has he returned from being summoned to Europe? Nicollet could see Stuart did not understand the reference. Father De Smet is a friend, even though we did not see eye to eye at the time. If you are a friend of Father De Smet, Father Vandevelde, then you will understand why I cannot accept help or sponsorship from the Catholic Church. Yes, I understand, but there is a new matter, a complication I feel you must be made aware of. There is someone looking for you. Am I in danger again? It was only a matter of time. Ah, yes, I am only standing here in front of you by the grace of God. I don't think you understand. The Indian who is looking for you showed up yesterday at the Potawatomi camp, demanding to see the Starman. Chapter 20. A glaze of ice covered most of Missouri. The storm came on the heels of 2 months of warmer than normal weather, turning a gray landscape into a scene of both terror and wonder. It looks like the glasswork shop on Rue de la Boche, Nicollet observed, missing Paris. The wheels of the wagon beneath him sounded like a grindstone as ice crunched between wood and frozen gravel. From time to time, a tree would groan, the ice would crackle, and the silence of the morning trek would end with a symphony of ice as another child of summer submitted to the icy grasp of winter. Beside him, Antoine Clement looked as wide-eyed as Virgil guiding Dante through the 9th level of hell. His gloved hand held the reins of the wagon, but his eyes were anywhere but on the slow road ahead of them. The poor Potawatomi, Nicollet said, halfway to the reservation. The residents of St. Louis suffered through the storm under the protection of roof and walled homes, but they had to endure the storm out in the open. Don't pity them too much, Clement said. These are the same people who forced my people north into Canada. I was taken prisoner by the Chippewa for 2 years until my father traded pelts to get me back. From under his blanketed hood, Sir William Stewart added his thoughts. Yes, save your pity. The Anishinaabe nation made war on all the way from Nova Scotia to the Missouri River. Leaving behind a dozen known tribes, like the Potawatomi in Michigan and the Chippewa in the north. They defeated every enemy in their way, with the help of your French forefathers. So where were they going? Nicollet asked. Stuart remained silent. Clement shrugged, leaving Nicollet alone with his theories. It's time, Nicollet, Stuart said bitterly. I've bent to your requests again and again. Your God spared my life so I could be on this miserable road with you today. Tell me this theory you hold. Having been to the Potawatomi camp several times, Nicollet knew he was too far away to stall the salty Scotsman. Why does the Catholic Church care? Neither Clement nor Stuart answered. A century ago, the discovery of Fort La Houlier might have mattered as a land claim, but now it is irrelevant since the land has passed to the United States of America. The Philosopher's Stone? No. If the staff of Moses had been brought to a secret land, then I could understand their interest. But why did the early Jesuits fix all their means and attention on following both the Order of Eos and the Anishinaabe? What do you mean they followed the Anishinaabe? What do you think those books were for? To help me sleep? If only they'd help me sleep. The Jesuit order methodically followed the migration of the Chippewa from their ancestral home near Nova Scotia all the way to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. The church does not benefit by finding a lost fort, nor does it benefit by finding some magic rock. What does the church gain or lose in this quest? So, what's the answer? That's what's been perplexing me for so long. It is the unanswered question. Are you serious? Stuart snapped. You better have a better answer than that. Fine. I do have a theory, but it is wrapped in speculation and conjecture. Nicollet looked over to the blanket-wrapped Stuart and knew he risked losing a vital ally. Sevens. Providence seems to be giving me clues about sevens. The Anishinaabe are guided by a prophecy described as 7 fires, and their mortal enemies, the Sioux, are a people who identify themselves as the Oceti-Sakowin, the 7 council fires. The Almaric map use stars to identify the mysterious place where water flows in all directions, with Marak or Merrick as the biggest clue. I don't know what Merrick means. Sure you do, Nicollet said cryptically. It is one of the 7 stars in the asterism known commonly as the Big Dipper. My Uncle William had an obsession with astrology, especially the North Star, which he called our Lady, Star of the Sea. The Big Dipper, specifically the stars Merrick and Dubhe, point the way to Polaris. The lore behind these stars is vast. Oh, Champollion, I still have so many questions for you. You're still holding back, Nicollet, so the Sioux, Chippewa, and even the Order of Eos all have their symbolic 7s. What of the Church? I had hoped to advance your religious training beyond the tenets of Christ before I discuss this, but how familiar are you with the revelation of St. John? The end times? Stuart scoffed. So it was you who concocted the story about vampire bats on the moon. Of course not. I'm simply trying to understand what a man like Father Simmons expects. I did not say I subscribe to these theories, did I? No. In the Revelation of St. John, it is filled with symbolic 7s. There are 7 archangels, 7 seals, 7 bowls of wrath, 7 bowls of judgment, and... This time, silent Clement snapped his head away from the road to coax Nicollet into an answer. And an obscure passage about a 7-headed water serpent. A Manitou, Clement asked. The Michiganabeg. Providence, I tell you both. Through my research and travels, I've learned most Native American tribes still dread a water serpent the same way St. John used the serpent as a symbol for ultimate evil. So we're on a quest to find the devil? Stuart recoiled angrily. I'd rather find a magical rock. Yes, I'm sure that is what Pierre Charles Le Sueur thought also. Lesueur, the copper miner? Why did he travel so far into the unknown with a professional mining crew? The Order of Eos would like to believe it is to find the Philosopher's Stone. But what would the Church expect to find buried? Just tell us. Oh, I don't really have that part of the answer yet. The passage baffles me, so I ask the two of you. A monster? Clement insisted. A body, Stuart offered. Perhaps of some lost patriarch, Noah's Ark, the Ark of the Covenant. Who can figure religious zealots? I certainly haven't been able to, Nicollet admitted, but it seems as if the three of us fight for their interests, even if we don't know the full truth yet. The crunch and crackle of ice continued, and Nicollet watched as Stuart's breath continued to emerge from the blanket in white puffs of agitation. Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act had forced the Potawatomi on a 400-mile migration from Michigan to the western shore of the Mississippi, where they made camp along the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. The floodplains along the river had been left unsettled, allowing the once mighty nation to find another temporary home. See, Stuart said as he allowed the blanket to drop from his shoulders, the Potawatomi might survive us all. Columns of smoke drifted through the barren cottonwood trees, growing along the southern bank of the Missouri. Children ran through the camp, playing on the slippery ground while the elderly piled up broken branches in front of the crude shelters. Once the children recognized the identity of the visitors, covered by coats and blankets, they crowded around the wagon. Nicollet hopped into the back and began to hand out crates of food and supplies that would only be enough to last a week. After the trio stepped out of the wagon, a few Potawatomi elders led them through the village and down to the shore. Thanks to Clement's tutelage, Nicollet understood much of what they spoke, but he allowed Stuart and Clement to translate. A visitor waded across the river on Pelican Island, leaving the three men no other choice than to make the perilous trek across the river. With a dip of the paddle, Nicollet's canoe veered toward the icy shore. At first, the nose of the canoe broke the thinnest ice along the flowing Missouri River, but 10 yards from the shore, the canoe halted. Flipping his paddle, Nicollet and the others had to perforate the ice, then break off chunks at a time, until finally his paddle could no longer puncture the ice, which meant it would be strong enough to stand upon. Rushing this mundane process meant almost certain death. If his foot broke through the ice waters, even if it was only knee-deep, he risked dying before a fire could warm and dry him. After hauling his canoe up onto the ice, Nicollet caught his breath and looked into the distant groves of trees where a single line of smoke rose into the gray sky. Just a few miles south, a cloud of smoke marked the edge of civilization, where the great cities of white men ate away at the corpse of a great bloated fish like a persistent snapping turtle. Just as Vandevelde described, Stuart said. Do you see how he carries some sort of beaded wampum belts on his shoulders? And the peace pipe? How does this prophet know me? Nicollet asked as he secured the canoe away from the flowing water. He doesn't know you, Clement answered, having gone alone the previous day to verify the presence of the stranger. He went to the... Memegwisi clan and demanded information. The Memegwisi clan, the Water Spirit clan, Clement translated. My tribe's clergymen. The Potawatomi are terrified of this stranger, which is why they sent for you. He's staying on the island lest he punish the people. Clement continued as they walked into the woods along the shore of the island. What did the old men call him? Hiawatha? Stuart smirked. They think this prophet is either a god or sent by a god. He so frightened the elders that half of them threw down their crucifixes they wore around their necks, lest they offend him, Clement said. Father Vandeveld was not pleased. The tall cottonwoods released cold drops of water along with chunks of melting ice that fell from the upper branches. The Potawatomi children told him they had been visited by a man from the stars, Clement added. Ridiculous, Nicollet said, suddenly understanding. Yes, your ability to blacken the moon and summon stars has impressed the Potawatomi, and now this prophet wants to meet you, Clement finished. Am I in danger? Nicollet asked Stuart. Besides bringing Antoine, I also brought a pistol and knife, Stuart added. We'll keep you safe. Instead of finding an old witch doctor beside a fire, Nicollet spotted a young man skinning a squirrel. With bloody hands, he stood up and smiled. Chapter 21. One of you must be the man from the stars, the young man greeted him with Nicollet's native tongue. I am Nicollet, he said, and the young man walked over slowly, and once he stood in front of him, he sized him up and then took a deep breath. You smell like flowers, he said with a slight grin. Caswell number 6. You speak French, Nicollet asked, surprised by the fluency of the young man. Do you also speak English? The uncertain nature of this visit has my friends on edge. Of course. My people have had dealings with Europeans since they arrived on the shores of Turtle Island. My English is much better since I only get to use French when I travel to Canada. You've traveled a long way, Stuart said in English. What brings you to the Florissant Valley? Yes, I have traveled a long way, seeking the fulfillment of prophecy of the bleeding star. Fulfillment of the prophecy of the bleeding star. I've traveled to the villages of the Anishinaabe, the Meskwaki, and the Oceti-Sakowin in advance of the omen, only to find it here, at my ancestral home. Cahokia. Stuart almost gasped at and his grumpy expression instantly turned to the wonder of a child. I have returned because the ancient prophecies say a star will appear to signal the arrival of the Wishwe. Both the children and the elders told me you knew all about this star. I do, Nicollet said. My grandfather said in the days of his grandfather, the same star appeared, signaling the coming of another Wishwe. The appearance of 1682, when both Le Sueur and Lahontan worked in the Great Lakes region. I am sorry, I do not know the word Wishwe. Wishwe is an old word. It is a word for a hero who will come to fight an ancient evil. The star that you summoned has made 2 appearances in recent memory, and I have come seeking Wishwe. Nicollet felt flush. Surely you don't think I am this Wishwe? The young man wiped off his bloody hands and ran the skinned squirrel with a stick. It was obvious he was very much a man and not a god, but he also did not look like any of the Potawatomi either. After sitting beside the fire, Nicollet took a moment to study the young man. If not for his long hair and deerskin clothing, the young man could have easily have transformed himself into a dock worker back in St. Louis. He had almost sandy blonde hair and grayish blue eyes. Once the young man leaned away from the fire, Nicollet asked, What is your name? I am Shakuzu Shatek, the man said proudly. Are you from the Mandan tribe? Stuart interrupted. Those who go underground? Shatek grinned widely, as if Stuart had said something funny. My people are much older than the pheasant people far upstream from here. My people are now spread all across the Great Turtle. We are the Glusta, the great peacemakers. Is that why you have come to Florissant? Clement asked. To seek the Anishinaabe from Muskegon River, a peaceful people? The young man's eyes tightened critically. The Anishinaabe have not always been peaceful, have they? In fact, the last time the Serpent Star arrived, the Anishinaabe stole peace from the land. How long ago was that? Nicollet asked. Shatek tilted his head as if studying Nicollet. It happened when my grandfather was just a boy. I could speak to you about moons, but you white men keep track of time by the sun, don't you? If I was to guess, I'd say it was about 70 years ago. Nicollet couldn't help but smile. Shatek, indeed, did understand the nature of Halley's Comet. What happened in 1758? What does it have to do with the present? Something of great value was stolen, and if the Wishwe has come, then I must return it to him. I began the journey south months ago, but only after seeking the truth. At a village on the Wisconsin River, the converted Menominee threw stones at me, chasing me from their village as a witch. Only by the graces of local authorities did I survive certain death, but I learned where the Potawatomi had been sent. Why do you seek the Potawatomi? Stewart asked. Because they were witness to the crime. My grandfather's grandfather explained that unless we honor the terms of the Bear Man, that the Great Spirit would send disease and pestilence upon our people. What terms? Nicollet asked. Who is the Bear Man? This wampum belt was made shortly after the comet appeared in my grandfather's grandfather's time. In those days, the Bear Man came, as did another Wishwe, who fell in love with one of the daughters of the Guardians of the Frontier. Guardians of the Frontier? Fremont's Santee? I wish the young math teacher could be here at this fire. Nicollet studied the beads, but it was as futile as interpreting hieroglyphics. What happened? What are the terms of the Bear Man? The Chippewa, with the help of the Potawatomi, destroyed the peace between the three nations who gathered at the place where the earth bleeds blue. And for the past 70 years, the Potawatomi and the Fox have been suffering the consequences. But if the Glusta cannot find what was stolen, all of mankind will suffer. Perhaps that is why you have been sent. What was stolen? Nicollet asked, glancing over at Stewart, whose eyes could not grow any wider. Shatek finally asked carefully chosen words. Why do they call you the man from the stars? I study stars. After showing the Potawatomi both an eclipse and a comet, they feel I am some sort of holy man that will restore health to their people. Are you? Heavens, no. I'm just Joseph Nicollet, the astronomer. I might bring them some food and vaccines, but my purpose here is very selfish. I simply seek to rebuild my good name by creating a map using barometric data to indicate elevation, Nicollet explained. What about you? The people whisper that you are an immortal. They whisper that you have come to punish them with disease for leaving the ways of the elders. No. In the days of my grandfather's grandfather, an ancient evil was released upon the land. For generations now, evil and death have spread over these lands and will continue to spread unless what has been lost is returned. I don't understand what you seek, Nicollet pressed, even if his immediate thoughts went to the legend of the Philosopher's Stone. The key of death does not look sinister, Shatek explained. In fact, it only appears to be a large stone. Shatek held his hands apart as if holding a small watermelon. It is smooth and white like a large egg, but its touch is smooth as glass. If you were to touch this stone, it would burn your hands if you held it. Left alone, this stone would even transform any substance around it. An alkahest. Nicollet allowed the words to spill from his mouth in front of the others. It chilled him to hear Shatek speak about it. What else does your wampum belt tell you about your grandfather's grandfather's time? It speaks of how the bear man snuck into the sacred lands of the Chedisakawan, waking this evil from the earth. Waking this evil from the earth? Nicollet could not help but think of Pierre Charles Lesueur's legendary mining expedition in 1700, 18 years after the arrival of Halley's Comet. The elders of my people believed in the appearance of the serpent star meant that the fulfillment of prophecy had come, but many others disagreed. To avoid bloodshed and war, the four nations made a treaty amongst the tribes in the presence of my ancestors. Early, you spoke of the bear man? Yes, the bear man signed on behalf of the French, but it was the French who broke the treaty. Soon afterwards, war erupted in the region. Now the French are gone, the Fox are gone, and the Ochedisakwan and Anishinaabe must answer for their crimes. In a great battle, the key of death was lost, and now that the star has returned again, I must discover what happened, or disease and pestilence will plague the earth. Waking this evil from the earth. Wait, where was it? Oh, there it is. Okay. The Potawatomi told me you are a traveling beggar, that you are destitute. Let me help you. I could give you money for that pipe you carry. There isn't enough money in all of St. Louis to give me a fair price for this pipe, Shatek mused. This pipe is priceless. It has been handed down from father to son for countless generations. All nations, young or old, respect the pipe and allow me admission into their villages while on my quest. I cannot sell this pipe. And you believe the Anishinaabe have taken the stone, the key of death, as you called it? Yes, I believe the Anishinaabe would know where the stone is located, but they will not let any of my people enter their village or territory for fear of reprisal. They might not even know what it is. Perhaps the Chippewa gave it to their French allies, and it is no longer in the lands to the north. Perhaps you were sent to help me find what has been lost. How would I find it? When the Dakota guarded it, it was found at a place called Spirit Island in their tongue. When the Anishinaabe searched for it, they said it would be located at an island shaped like a turtle, where the food grew on water. In both legends, the place is guarded by a water spirit. So it will take a great prophet to find it in the vast north, if it is even there. What am I supposed to do if I do find it? Nicollet asked. Shatek gave him an answer he did not expect to hear. It is a bold plan, Stuart reminded himself. One that will catch all of our enemies off guard. His luggage was transferred from the wagon and into the large paddle boat departing for New Orleans, which would then allow him to travel to Cuba. Fortunately, the weather had quickly warmed, allowing the Mississippi River to open for him to depart on schedule, without a dime to his name. Neither Nicollet nor Clement were with him as he departed, and it might be years before he saw them again, if ever. And he knew. It might be years before he saw them. Okay, there we go. I am alone, he thought, but a smirk hid below his dark mustache. What's up?
I don't know if you're doing something.
I was just recording my audio.
Do we?
Your bags are loaded, Lord Stuart, a boy from the carriage said. Lord Stuart, this will be hard on the young chap. Well done, Stuart praised, but instead of coin or bill, he just shook the young man's outstretched hand and patted him on the shoulder as he walked toward the plank. A few days earlier, Stuart had taken the last of his money, counted it out, and then stuffed it into the pockets of Nicollet's vest. "Take it," Stuart had insisted. "You've earned it. I only wish I could give you more. Any more, and I'll draw far too much attention. I shall wear incompetence and poverty upon my chest like a coat of arms," Nicollet said, tucking away the money. "Did you give enough to Antoine?" "Antoine does not need money to survive in the wilderness. He only struggles when I bring him to civilization. It's probably good he is not going with me to Cuba. I wish he was staying with me." "Incompetence and poverty," Stuart repeated. "It's your plan." "I will miss him. His help with the language of the Anishinaabe has been invaluable. It is too bad we'll never see Antoine again." "It is," Nicollet smiled warmly. Now, weeks later, Stuart quickly inspected his cabin, took off his jacket, and then walked down to the dining room to watch the city of St. Louis disappear. "Would you like a refreshment, Lord Stuart?" another cabin boy asked. "Scotch whiskey," Stuart said, "lest I shed a tear." He looked at the white table mat, remembering how Nicollet had taken a sheet of paper and set it on his kitchen table after they returned from the strange visit to Chetek. "So, you agree with me that it is a sign from God?" Stuart asked as Nicollet gathered up his ink instruments. "Yes, but that does not mean we have to act like zealous fools. Let's review all of the facts we've been given before we make any plans. First, according to Chetek, we are looking for an island, be it Turtle Island or Spirit Island. Food growing on water," Clement had added from the window by the sink. "That certainly means wild rice fields, the Wisconsin territory." "Thank you, Antoine," Nicollet said, writing down the clue. "The oldest source we have, the Alchemist map, gives me specific clues about longitude and latitude." "How did you determine that?" Stuart asked. "It's quite complicated, actually. Ancient sailors used stars for navigation, but it was rudimentary. While Polaris, the North Star, is a fixed point, the other stars in the sky move from season to season and from hemisphere to hemisphere. At a specific time of year, certain constellations will rise and fall at a specific location on the horizon. The Alchemist map seemed to be using the modern longitude of the 44th parallel." "And where is that?" Stuart asked. "For a sailor, you'd run into the American continent at Nova Scotia. But then you'd have thousands of miles possible of locations along a line that would eventually end up at the Pacific." "Really? So where does it cross the Mississippi?" "Near the headwaters," Nicollet winked, "west of the Wisconsin territory." "What else do we know?" "The Alchemist map also showed a place where the water flows in all directions toward a central point, which of course is impossible. Nowhere on the globe do we see rivers flowing toward one spot, or they'd become a lake. Yet the Lahontan map described a divide, a watershed. That is our clue." "Don't forget copper," Clement said. "Ah, yes. All three maps were consistent about this fact, weren't they? We must find a place where copper is exposed to the elements, most likely near a cliff." "And we're back to seeking an island," Stuart said. "Chetek described a large egg." "Clearly the Philosopher's Stone," Nicollet finished. "Chetek said it was guarded by a water spirit, which explains why the copper became vitriol, and the alchemists labeled it with the symbol of the Undine. However, even with all of these clues, we have two major problems." "The killer knows you've seen the map," Stuart said, "and that I have become your ally." "Oh, yes, which means if I do manage to acquire either public or private patronage, I will be either watched or killed." "That hasn't stopped you yet." "But it will. Nicollet said coldly. If I do manage to find a way north, I will have to search while spontaneously leading a campaign of misinformation. But here is the bigger problem. If the Philosopher's Stone was indeed unearthed by Lesueur in 1682 and stolen by the Ojibwe in 1758, then it could be anywhere around the Great Lakes. Even if we find Fort La Houlier, it does not mean we'll find the stone. A quick knock came at the door, and Stuart and Clement armed themselves before Nicollet warily opened it. The hallway was empty, but a wrapped package rested on the ground. When Nicollet opened it, the three men stared at Chetek's wampum belt. "What does this mean?" Nicollet asked, rushing to the window for a glimpse of the wandering shaman. "There's your god at work again," Stuart then suggested a plan he'd later regret. "Antoine can speak French, English, Cree, Sioux, and Chippewa, but to most men, he's just a big métis, worthy of day labor. Your point?" Nicollet asked. Stuart had then reached into his jacket, retrieved his wallet, and began counting out how much money he had left. It was a plan that left him broke, alone, and heading to Cuba.